The New York Times and others are promoting a story in the aftermath of Musk's takeover and altering of the environment, in which hate speech has skyrocketed on Twitter in the aftermath. Is that there on that screenshot?
I don't see it.
It was on a different one that showed that better.
Okay.
Hold on, let me find it.
So anyway, here's my point. A, this is a nonsense story as far as anybody can tell, right? I have been on Twitter plenty in recent days. I have not seen any hate speech. It's not showing up. And one obvious interpretation is that if in fact they are reporting anything real at all, that they are reporting something like the number of tweets, which would be an easily gamed metric, and they are not reporting what people are actually seeing, that is to say, impressions of these things. And those two things are liable to have diverged radically given what Musk did with certifications, where a huge number of people found themselves able to get certification quickly and now have access to filters that allow them to look at the content posted by other certified accounts. So were you to have an army of bots posting hate speech, either because they can or because the idea is to make Twitter look like a hellscape at the moment, then the New York Times and other such establishments could report that hate speech has taken off in the aftermath of this change, when in fact, from the point of view of actual users, the opposite has likely happened.
Well, I mean, there's certainly a number of people who have those blue checks now and they can filter, but the vast majority of people still don't. But I would say that the bodies are likely to be buried with regard to this New York Times article that you're talking about that I have not seen, in the definition of hate speech. What it is that they are classifying as hate speech is likely to be something about which reasonable people could disagree.
Well, that is certainly true. It is also true that all eyes are on Twitter because 0 is a special number, and therefore the amount that is resting on them being able to kill off Musk's experiment is much greater than we would think from a business perspective or size of Twitter perspective. Yeah. But the real point I want to make is this. One of the things that will emerge if we are able to have a free and open conversation about all topics, including difficult ones, is that this whole idea, the whole woke revolution, is founded on the idea that if we can police what you can say, that will make people better, right?
Yep.
No way. Now, I have advanced a very difficult idea, one that people do not like, which is that there is a predictable reason that anti-Semitism in particular rises at certain moments in history, and it has to do with transfer frontiers, which you and I describe in our book. And the idea is, look, this is a matter of economic contraction causing two things. One, people's natural tendency to break into lineages and fight each other, and the cynical use of that instinct on people's part by elites who do not want to be targeted, elites who may have concentrated wealth and power in their own pockets and hands, and who are redirecting that anger at other people to whom we are evolutionarily biased to be suspicious.
Yeah.
That's a challenging argument. Now, that argument needs to be on the table, right? Of course, lots of people will tell you that that argument is somehow justifying racism or something like this. They make the naturalistic fallacy. So in a world where petty people who know very little are empowered to police what is allowed to be discussed, an idea like that likely will not be discussed. Now, if you look at what's taking place, we are watching. Any Jew knows that we are watching an immense rise in anti-Semitism in the last several years, but in particular in the last few months. My claim is that is a natural consequence of something which is being amplified by something else, and we better pay attention to what's causing that. It's not the freedom to talk this way that is causing people to do that. The freedom to talk that way is allowing us to see that they are doing that, which is vitally important that we know. If we shield ourselves from what people are actually saying and thinking, then we are liable to be caught off guard, which is the worst possible thing that can happen in these cases. The key to understanding what to do and preparing properly for it is knowing that it's occurring. And so, again, the argument here couldn't be stronger. If you understand it at a deep level, the fact that you are seeing anti-Semitism means that we have to be alert to it and we have to be able to detect it rather than having some nanny decide that you're going to, be emotionally harmed by hearing this and therefore you won't be allowed to, even if you want to tune in, right? So,
and the things that are being disappeared run the gamut from truly horrible things that people believed at some points to things within the range of normal for a time that is now past, to made up things like getting rid of the word supremacy and quantum supremacy because apparently that's violent and colonial. And so it's not even like I could try to steelman the idea of censoring the past by saying if you see that something has been censored, you know that will have been a very bad thing. I think it's a stupid argument, but it doesn't hold up because the variety of things that they're censoring is so remarkable. They're trying to take out everyone who isn't living in a bubble right now, and most of language. And it's part of why I find Krylov standing up as a scientist, as an academic scientist, and saying no, and no one else should be agreeing with this, particularly strong because she saw it. And we talked a lot in the first year or so of Dark Horse, a lot more than we have of late, about having noticed that many people who grew up behind the Iron Curtain or in Soviet, in Soviet Russia, who have been in the U.S. or have been in the West for most of their adult lives or all of their adult lives, seem particularly likely to be able to see the stirrings and the intimations and sometimes the very obvious stuff that is happening with regard to censorship and worse. And why should that be? Well, why should it be? Because these are people who can do pattern recognition, and they saw this once before, and they're seeing it now. And if you think it can't happen here, you got another thing coming.
I would also point out one other thing. On the list of tools that we need in order to navigate dangerous shit like this, top of the list is humor.
Yeah.
Right? And the problem is, if you think you are going to police bad thought out of existence by detecting it when it is uttered and getting rid of it, well, what the hell do you do with the comedy that is necessary to ridicule bad ideas out of existence? Right? That is an essential tool. And, this goes back actually to the hot water that Dave Chappelle got into a few weeks back. For pointing out the special power of the phrase "the Jews." Now, it was actually, I think he was wrong. I thought it was funny, but
I don't know anything about
this.
He
did this on Saturday Night Live, and he was basically saying that that there is a rule, an unwritten rule, that in fact these are two words you can't put together, the Jews, right? And the point was that there's something to discuss about the Jews. And anyway, I did think it was funny. I did think it was wrong, but I also thought that
Wait, you did or you did not?
I thought it was both funny and wrong. I know he has a point, right? I don't think the point is the one that he made, but I also thought, as you know, I love Dave Chappelle, right? And I love Dave Chappelle, especially on issues of race, right? He's quite excellent. He has a way, it's not like he doesn't have a perspective, he does, but he also has a way of understanding what's on the other side of that, which makes his humor just devastating.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was the invitation to a conversation that needs to be had. Not a very comfortable one, but one that I wish we would have, rather than try to, bar such things at the door, which is only going to result in them, festering and then erupting in some much more troubling way.
Yep.
In fact, I will point out that the Jews who got caught off guard in Europe were Jews who were telling themselves, you know what, it sucks, it's terrible, but it will blow over, right? They underestimated the danger. Now, how much greater is the chance of underestimating a danger if somebody has protected you from hearing it being discussed, right?
That's right.
That's a very bad idea. So
Yes, and in fact, I remember exactly this sentiment at the FIRE conference, the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, I think is what FIRE stands for. You were invited to speak at, and we went to the FIRE conference in 2017 in Dallas. And one of the higher ups at FIRE, I don't remember exactly who, I'm afraid, said precisely this. And I don't remember who the sort of Yahoo white nationalist du jour was then, so I'm not going to come up with the name. But there was someone making the news, and there was all sorts of brouhaha about, like, you cannot let this man speak. And this guy associated with FIRE says, please let him speak. Like, the best thing in the world for all of us who abhor the ideas and tenets of white nationalism is to let them talk and let them, dig their own graves.
Well, let's do this right. I agree with this sentiment. I've said a similar thing, that I want to hear these people. I want it known what they are saying. It does not mean that what they are saying does not catch on because people hear it. The problem is there's this deeper layer. Why does it catch on? If you're not dealing with the thing that supports racism, anti-Semitism in particular, and I say in particular because the diaspora of Jews lends itself to being attacked when you have an economic contraction. But the point is, there is a downside. It's not that no anti-Semite or other racist is going to persuade anybody by speaking. They will. But the point is, why are they vulnerable to being persuaded? That has to do with the stuff we really should be addressing, right? These things go away. They go away when times look a certain way, and then they come back when those conditions reverse. And understanding that pattern is the key to addressing this. You cannot address it by policing speech. Right. And so even trying is absurd. And one other thing I wanted to add, the list of terms that we are supposed to swap out for other terms, the tell in that one is trigger warning. Because trigger warning isn't actually bad. It's one of the things that you could borrow from the woke revolution and say, actually, you know what, that has a place, right? Because what it does is it reduces the downside of speech, right? If I say, look, I mean, in fact, I was in this situation. I gave trigger warnings, not very regularly. I didn't feel required to give them, but I felt morally required sometimes. For example, evolutionary biology, there are cases in the animal kingdom, there are cases in human populations, there are cases in discussing human history where we have to talk about rape, where it is an important force, right? Doesn't mean justifying it, but we got to talk about it. If you're going to talk about it, and you're going to talk about it to a room of women, some of whom will have had this experience, giving them a trigger warning is a compassionate thing to do, right? And so the point is, trigger warning, of all of the things that the woke revolution has asserted and promoted, right, that's one of the ones I would say, actually, you know what, I don't like what you've done with it. I don't like your absurd assertion about, the fact that somebody's guilty of something because they didn't utter one. But I do believe that it has a place, and that place is part of protecting speech rights, right? And so the whole idea, well, maybe that's the problem with trigger warning, is that too many people thought, actually, yeah, okay. Too many people who would be on the other side of that have actually said, yeah, actually, I'm going to give you a trigger warning because it's a reasonable thing to do.
That's interesting. Yeah, I never did, but in a day that was going to include 3 hours of sort of interactive lecture, the kinds of topics that we would be talking about would be known in advance. So
So it was kind of already built in.
I am positive that I never uttered the words trigger warning. Here's a trigger warning. Our Epic Tabby has just broken into the liquor cabinet.
Oh my goodness.
Off screen.
All right.
So our producer is going to go rescue the cat and close that up. I hadn't heard that explanation from you for why a trigger warning might be valuable, and I think maybe what it amounts to is because you didn't leave a written trace you didn't have a syllabus wherein they could see, oh, this is the thing. These are the things that we're going to be talking about today. You had to do that in order to give them some indication, and I effectively
Built
you
it
know,
in.
and I think until you said it that way, I felt like I think many people who object to the overreach and inconsistencies and diabolical nature of most of the diversity, equity, and inclusion movement thought that it was babying people, right? Like, no, grow up. This is like, you're not going to get trigger warnings in life, so I'm not going to give you a trigger warning either. That said, okay, yes, we're talking about sexual selection, evolution of sex roles. We're talking about all of these things, and so you can and should expect that difficult topics will come up around that. And if you don't, given what all of the things that we're talking about are, well, then that is on you. Actually.
Yeah, although I would say, and I don't think a trigger warning necessarily has to be called a trigger warning, and
Right.
it sounds like there was one, and it was sort of global. Right. There are difficult topics in here. They will come up. Right. So, in any case, it's clearly a valid form. Right. It's clearly, as long as it is treated properly, it is clearly a valid form, and it is being abused, as so many things are. I mean, the term woke itself being an example of a valid concept that has been abused to the point of foolishness.